Welcome to the Hallmark Publishing Audiobook Sampler, brought to you by Dreamscape Media. In this bundle, you will be able to sample all new Hallmark Publishing audiobooks that includes Christmas in Evergreen, Christmas in Evergreen, Letters to Santa, and Christmas in Evergreen, Tidings of Joy. Enjoy. Book 1, Christmas in Evergreen, written by Nancy Naigle and narrated by Kathleen McKierney.
Chapter 1. In northern Vermont, so far north that on clear days you might be able to see the North Pole, lies the magical town of Evergreen. A snowy town, all done up for Christmas, with a tree in the town square right next to the gazebo, and festive decorations on every single building. And Evergreen takes Christmas seriously, all year round. Even the sign at the edge of town has jolly old Saint Nick waving a welcome to every visitor. From there, it's just a short drive through the rustic covered bridge, then a lovely mountain ride down the only road into town. Some say it's the decorations that make this little town so special, but others believe it's because of something else entirely, something you wouldn't expect at all. A snow globe. Yes, a very special snow globe. Where would one find this magical snow globe, you might ask? Right on Main Street, in the Kringle kitchen, a family-owned diner with a Yuletide spin. It's the heart of this town, always filled with the locals. Outside, the sign boasts Kringle Kitchen in bold red letters with candy cane trim, and Santa carrying his sack full of toys and waving. The inside of the diner is just as festive as the outside, and the snow globe, well, it's right there near the front door on the counter next to the cash register, where everyone has access to it. In its place of honor, a raised platform surrounded by fresh evergreen, the snow globe gets a lot of attention from everyone who passes through the doors. The globe's wintry scene is exquisite. A horse-drawn sleigh holds a cozy couple tucked beneath a blanket. The woman's scarf trails behind her in the air as the horse trots through the snowy valley. The brown horse looks strong and fast, and his red harness matches the red and green sleigh. The actual glass water globe with the miniature version of Evergreen inside rises from between snow-tipped Christmas trees. The whole scene sits atop the hand-carved wooden base, ready to be shaken. A sign in a pretty frame reads, "Make a Christmas wish, but only if you know what your heart really wants." But this wasn't just any snow globe. No, they say that if you shake this one just so and make one wish, the true wish of your heart, Christmas magic will make it come true. Now, I know what you're thinking. Could a snow globe really grant wishes? Well, maybe the story of Christmas in Evergreen will help you believe. Most of the year, the town of Evergreen could be called the Emerald City for all its glorious greenery. The pine, spruce, fir, and holly dot the landscape in 100 shades of green. But as the seasons change and the holidays near, everything is blanketed in snow, and the town gets dressed in all its traditional finery, turning the snowy Main Street with its quaint shops into the idyllic Christmas spot. From the cheerful ribbons on each lamppost to the lighted garland along the eaves of every single storefront, shiny, oversized ornaments in red, green, and gold dangle from the garland and match the decorations in the giant wreaths hung between each shop. Fresh pine roping weaves through the white porch railing in front of the professional offices across the street from the post office, continuing the festive look from one end of Main Street clear down to the other. Today, the snow fell in big fluffy flakes as people hurried along with their glossy shopping bags, going about their last-minute business the week before Christmas. "Hey, everyone! Here we come!" Allie Shaw stepped out of the exam room of her clinic, carrying a basket of 6-week-old puppies in for their first checkup. Pug puppies, to be specific. 3 in all. 2 solid black females and a boy, bigger than the others, in the more typical fawn color. Their velvety button ears hung against their broad foreheads, accenting those big bug eyes. Absolutely adorable, from their wrinkled faces right down to their curling tails. Hannah, Allie's friend and the owner of the pups, sat in the chair directly facing the examination room. These puppies were just as cute as the Christmas sweater she was wearing. That gal loved Christmas more than anyone Allie knew. Allie's next 2 furry 4-legged patients were already waiting for their appointments. Teddy, a hyper terrier who'd jumped straight from his owner's arms to the examination table, doing tricks for a treat before she even got the door closed, perked his ears, looking back at his owner in hopes it was his turn now. Mandy Miller, the town's cat lady, sat on the other side of Hannah, clutching a red pet kennel. Allie could barely see the orange tabby cat backed into the corner of the small carrier. Less than happy about being trapped, the feral cat wasn't shy about letting the world know how he felt about it. The overconfident meowing could probably be heard next door. Allie had no doubt this was another stray that needed to be fixed. It seemed like all stray cats eventually made it over to Mandy's house. She'd already told Mandy this was the last day she was taking patients. Everyone had been squeezing in vet visits before she left. She knew Dr. Myers wouldn't be as generous with the neutering fee as she was, which was too bad, because Mandy really was trying to do a good deed at her own expense. Allie gave them both a quick smile and then said to Hannah, "Okay, these guys have got their shots and are ready for their first Christmas." Hannah jumped from her chair and raced over to see her puppies, giving them each a rub on the forehead. This was the part of the job Allie never tired of. She loved having her own practice. Sure, there were days when difficult things had to be taken care of, and she turned into a veterinarian and owner-therapist all in one. But even those days, she knew she'd done her best to help a family through the situation they'd been dealt. Allie handed the large oval wicker basket of pugs over to Hannah. Hugging the basket to herself, Hannah couldn't help but smile and coo. "Aw, I can't get over how cute they are." "How's our new mama doing?" Allie had given Molly her puppy shots 2 years ago and had been her doctor ever since. She'd be lying if she said it didn't make her a little sad to be handing over the medical needs of her patients to someone else now. It was like leaving best friends behind for summer break in elementary school, only forever. "Molly definitely has her paws full with these guys." Hannah blew kisses to the pups between words as she moved over in front of the Christmas tree to put some distance between herself and the noisy cat. Too bad Allie didn't have her camera handy. This would have been the perfect photo op with Hannah holding the puppies next to the clinic's animal-themed Christmas tree with the paw print paper chain garland. Well, there was a hoof print or 2 in there as well. All of her patients participated in that tradition. Even Rhoda the Rhode Island red hen, who'd broken her wing in a scrape with the neighbor's dog over at Henry Holloway's farm, had a link in the chain. After they'd bandaged Rhoda up, Allie and Henry had dipped her foot in white water-based paint and pressed it down on a pretty red strip of colored paper, leaving the recognizable peace sign prints. That was the first chicken print Allie'd ever had the pleasure of incorporating into her garland. Just paper and staples, but she loved adding to the memories each year. Allie walked over to the front desk and updated the chart with the next follow-up appointments. "They sure are going to miss you." Hannah's voice was almost sad. "I'll miss them too." It was hard to imagine life away from this clinic and these animals she knew so well. "I'm going to miss all my furry patients. Their parents, too." "Wait a minute. You won't have any furry patients in D.C.?" Allie made her way from the front desk back to Hannah. "No, I will, but I'm going to be working in a big clinic. I don't know if I'll have time for a pile of pugs." She lifted the tan puppy from the basket and held him in the air. Now she wouldn't even see these little guys grow up. In the clinic, the size of the one she was going to work for, she might not have a history with any of the patients like she did here. They had assistants who did routine checks. It would definitely be different. "Aren't you going to miss it?" Hannah asked. The tan puppy whimpered and wiggled. Allie's heart swelled. These compact pups were strong and a lot of dog in a little space. She'd have named this little hunk of love Brutus if he was hers. "I'm so lucky to have a job I love so much. How could anything be better than this?" She shook the worry from creeping in. She'd miss her small practice, but she was also eager to embrace the possibilities ahead. "Of course I will, but this is a big opportunity. I can't pass it up." Allie took in a steadying breath. Was she trying to convince Hannah or herself? She'd miss girls' night out with Hannah and the gang, too. It wasn't easy leaving Evergreen, but she had to give it a try. Grandpa had always said there was a big world out there. It would be a shame not to experience it for herself. She'd spent her whole life in this town, except for those few years she'd gone away to college. How would she ever know where she belonged if she stayed here in Evergreen? "And you've got Dr. Myers's number and info in Montpelier, right?" "Yep." "He's great." The puppy squirmed in Allie's hands and then locked gazes with her, as if trying to convince her to stay. "Yes, he is, but—" Hannah shook her head and then whispered, "It's going to be different." "I know." Allie put the puppy back in the basket with his sisters. "But different is good, right? Like having a whole bunch of puppies is different, and that's a good thing, right?" Hannah shrugged and turned her attention back to the puppies. "Yeah, I can't wait to find these guys a new home." The woman made her way to the door. "Bye, Allie." Allie leaned forward on the desk, peering into the goldfish bowl there. "Now, we just have to find a home for you, Frank." She was half tempted to bag Frank up and move him with her, but that seemed silly for a dime store goldfish. She'd had at least 12 Franks over the years, replacing them as they died of old age. Besides, Mom would enjoy taking care of Frank. He might even end up by the magic snow globe on the counter at the diner. That wouldn't be so bad. Although it did kind of make her wish she'd sprung for the little castle or treasure chest for his bowl now. Allie finished the other patients. Just as she'd suspected, the cat was a stray. She gave the cat a checkup and its shots, then scheduled the surgery for the day she got back from D.C. Allie was quite certain Dr. Meyer would charge more than she had for the procedure, but Allie wanted to help reduce the problem of unwanted kittens. If Mandy Miller was kind enough to capture the feral cats, the least she could do was make it affordable for her to do the good and responsible deed. With the waiting room finally cleared out, she tidied the examination room, filed all the paperwork, and then checked her list to be sure she hadn't forgotten anything. Everything on her list was marked off, except for Frank. She glanced over at the goldfish. He was content in his glass fishbowl, swimming among the bright blue rocks and dipping behind the anacharis on those days when Frank was feeling shy. There'd still be a lot to do when she got home after Christmas. This trip this week was just to sign the lease on her new apartment. Well, that and spend Christmas with Spencer there. They'd be attending a few Christmas parties, and he was excited to show her the city Christmas lights. Then it would be back home to do the final preparations for the big moving day. She'd done a pretty good job getting the house packed so the movers could come and pick up everything the week before she started her new job. Boxes were stacked in every room of her house, but here at the office, she hadn't even begun to liquidate all her pet supplies. The new practice wasn't interested in her bringing any inventory along, so she still had a lot to do. Finally, there was Frank. He needed to be tended to while she was away. She cleaned out his bowl and then put his food in her pocket, then called the Kringle kitchen to let her parents know she was on her way down with Frank. Even though the diner was a short walk, just a few stores up the block and across the street, the bitter Vermont temperatures and snow required bundling up. She took off her white lab coat and hung it on the rack. Her grandmother had embroidered her name on this coat as a graduation gift, and she'd worn it every day since. The new practice required that they all wear the lab coats provided for them with the corporate logo and a couple of vendor patches. The idea of sponsors seemed weird to her, but that was big business for you. She took her red wool coat down from the hook next to the door and pulled it on, tugging the belt tight around her waist. She lifted Frank's fishbowl from the desk and hugged it to her body as she left. Using her old waitressing skills, she walked at a slow, steady pace, moving her legs, but not her torso or arms, so as to not cause a tsunami in Frank's world on the short trip to her parents' diner. "Hang on, Frank."
Book 2, Christmas in Evergreen, Letters to Santa, written by Nancy Naigle and narrated by Kathleen McKierney.
Chapter 1. Deep in the valleys of Vermont, there's a town called Evergreen. It's said that Evergreen is so far north that on clear days you might be able to see the North Pole. Perhaps that's why townsfolk take Christmas very seriously all year long, even going so far as to have a picture of Santa waving on the "Welcome to Evergreen" sign on the way into town. The city of Burlington, not so far away, moves at a faster pace. The town bustles with the rush of holiday shoppers carrying their special finds and colorful packages. At Spruce Collectibles, Lisa Palmer and her business partner, Oliver, were both hard at work. They'd been hired to stage the boutique store for its annual Christmas sale. Lisa worked the last sparkling blue ribbon from the top of a tall Christmas tree all the way to the bottom. She tucked it deep into the evergreen branches every foot or so, then let it billow down to the next spot, an exercise in precise disarray that made the tree appear full and elegant. It had taken Lisa over 50 yards of wired ribbon to pull off the look, but it was worth it. She'd adorned the rest of the tree with untraditional blue hydrangea and beautiful glass balls in various shades of blue, royal, sky blue, and even turquoise. Flocked pine cones and fresh chartreuse pears offered a gorgeous contrast against the dark green boughs. At the top of the tree, a brown speckled partridge in a nest of silver lace tied into the store's 12 Days of Christmas theme. Concentrating on the task at hand, Lisa tucked silver poinsettia picks between the branches to fill any bare spots. She stepped back to evaluate the tree, then turned to Oliver. "Does this line up?" She gestured to the way she'd arranged the poinsettias. Over his shoulder, the ever-stylish and funny Oliver, wearing a burgundy V-neck cashmere sweater, turned from the display of white candles he was working on to check it out. "Yeah, perfectly." "Ugh." She winced and dropped her hands to her side. "Then I have to start over." She plucked 4 poinsettias from the tree. "Oh, good," Oliver said facetiously. "I was worried we'd be done in time to get dinner." "Dinner is overrated." He was mocking her. "You know, symmetry is just lazy design," they said at the same time. "Yes, I know." Oliver echoed the sentiment with a smile. He moved one of his symmetrically arranged candles out of position. Their icy evergreen scent lifted into the air like a Christmas hello. Nodding with satisfaction, he spun around and walked toward Lisa. "Note to self, when we open our own store, everything's going to have to be just slightly off-kilter." He exaggerated the comment with hand gestures. "Yes, impeccably designed," Lisa said with a highfalutin accent as she handed off a few of the sparkling poinsettias to Oliver to place. "And locally sourced." "Uh-huh," she giggled, then tucked another flower into just the right spot on the tree. It was so nice to work with someone that saw things the way she did. She and Oliver were always finishing each other's sentences, and this job had come together so well she couldn't wait for the store owner, Polly, to see it. Oliver took one poinsettia from the other side of the tree and repositioned it slightly askew. "The tree really does look great." She took a giant step back and put her hands on her hips to give it a sweeping up-and-down glance. "Yeah, it does." She folded her arms across her chest with satisfaction. "Wait." Oliver looked past her toward the back of the store. "Do you think we need a second tree back there?" She glanced over her shoulder, then spun to his side. "You know what? I was just thinking that." She gestured toward the back of the store. "I mean, it would pull the eye of the customer back that way," Oliver said. "And that's where the most expensive items are." "We need a second tree." They finished the sentence together again. "Yeah." She tapped her fingers beneath her chin. Slightly squinting, she imagined how it might look nestled between the beautiful maple shelving units. A second tree would be perfect, but if Polly was happy with what they'd done, she'd have to let it go. The Christmas decorations had been an added thank you for the big contract they'd completed for her. Anything else would just cut into their profit. A knock at the door broke her focus on the back of the store. Lisa spun around to look. "Oh, there's Polly." The store owner stood waving from the sidewalk. Bundled in a camel-colored wool cape, she looked like she was bubbling over with excitement. Lisa felt excited herself to flaunt all the hard work they'd completed. She patted Oliver on the arm and dashed over to open the door. "Hi, come on in." "Hello." Polly didn't waste a moment rushing into the store to see what changes they'd made. She didn't even bother to put down her purse and gloves. After taking one glance, she gasped, "It looks amazing in here. Oh my gosh." She waved an arm where the register counter used to be. "Yeah, we moved the counter to the side of the store," Oliver started. Lisa finished, "which opens up the flow from the door to the rest of the store." They simultaneously gestured to the back of the store as if they'd choreographed the move. "And you redesigned the entire shelving unit." Polly's head swiveled, taking in all the changes. "It looks great over there." Lisa and Oliver shared an appreciative glance. Thank goodness Polly was happy with what they'd done. It was a significant change. Polly moved through the store, zigging and zagging as things caught her eye, and then made a beeline for the tree Lisa and Oliver just finished decorating in the center of her store. "And to top it all off, you decorated for Christmas." She walked around the tree, slowly examining the different ornaments, still clutching her red gloves in her hand. She oohed and awed at the sight of the shiny decorations. Pointing to the tree topper, she looked perplexed. "Is that a partridge?" "In a pear tree?" Oliver said with a smile. It had been his idea. "Yes, it is." Polly beamed. "And we have 2 turtle doves." He led her over to the 2 frosty white-feathered birds next to the candles, 3 French hens, ceramic ones nestled on a stack of seasonal embroidered flour sack towels, 4 calling birds, and 5 golden rings. He pointed toward the different size rings that now hung above the checkout. Polly's excited giggle filled the space with even more joy. "It's just a little service we throw in for jobs this time of year." He looked over at Lisa with a wink and a smile. "You two are the best at redesigning stores like this. Have you ever thought of opening your own store?" His face lit up. "In fact, yes," he blurted at the same time Lisa said, "Eventually." The two of them looked at each other, realizing they'd just given Polly a mixed message. "Yes," Lisa tried to correct the faux pas. "Eventually," Oliver added. "Well, you know I'm expanding, right? I plan to open 3 new stores in the new year." "That's great. Where are you thinking?" Oliver asked. "I'm still searching for locations, but I would love your expertise when designing them, if you're free for more work." "Of course," Lisa brightened. "Yes." "Yes," Oliver agreed. "We would love to help in any way we can." Lisa bumped Oliver's shoulder with excitement. "Wonderful!" Polly rushed around the store, still taking in all the changes. "Oh my goodness!" Captivated by the changes, Polly moved through the store, reveling in every little change. "Goodness, yes!" Lisa and Oliver shared a silent celebration at the prospect of working with Polly again. Seeing their clients this delighted was the best part of the job. The only thing left to do was stick around to make sure all the employees knew where everything was located now, and be on standby as the first customers came in for any last-minute adjustments on staging that didn't work out quite as well in real time as it had on paper. Later that day, Polly signed off on the completed project. Lisa and Oliver headed out of the store together, ready to head their separate ways for the holidays. Now Oliver would go back to Boston. That was his town, and he loved it. Lisa wasn't entirely sure of her plans, since her parents were traveling. She let out a big sigh as she pulled her leather jacket on over her sweater. "You know, if we keep getting work at this rate, we'll be able to open our own store in less than 2 years. Even though they'd talked about it many times, she wasn't entirely sure how she felt about it, now that it was becoming closer to a reality. "The very best in home decoration and design," Oliver said with pride. "Custom kitchenware, fixtures, and design accessories. Everything you need to turn your house into a home." Oliver turned to catch up with Lisa, who was double-timing it down the street. "What?" "Nothing. It's just that—" She sighed again, heavier this time. Still walking, she turned to Oliver. "I love what we do. We get to travel around and redesign spaces." I know. We've made it through every business decision, every terrible date." Lisa thought about the time she had to tell Oliver he wore too much cologne. She loved working with him, bad high-dollar cologne and all. They really could get through anything together. He was her best friend. "Look," she never broke stride, "all I'm saying is that I'm just not sure that I'm ready to put down roots and stay in one place." "Ah, and speaking of which, someone has their final New Year's resolution from last year to take care of." Oliver tapped his watch. "Time is ticking." Lisa groaned. "Every year we make these resolution lists, and every year you have the same goal." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Visit my hometown for Christmas. I know. But what if it's not the same as I remember as a kid?" Ruining the picture of the perfect Christmas in her mind was a big risk. Memories of Evergreen had carried her for a lot of years. If she lost that, she didn't know what she'd do. "Then, either way, you'll cross it off your list." She pursed her lips. "But I was just thinking that maybe I should wait for my parents to go." "But your parents," Oliver said, as he stepped in front of her, "are in Europe and working. You're not. Now you can go back to your hometown." She didn't have another valid argument. Honestly, Evergreen was her best memory, not really her parents'. They might never want to go back. They'd never even talked about it. She pulled her phone up and tapped on it. "Let me show you." She stepped closer to him, bringing up her favorite snow picture of Evergreen. Taken from the highway overlooking the town below, it was a true winter wonderland. Look! Even just looking at the snow pictures of Evergreen made her heart happy.
"That's gorgeous."
Isn't it cute? She remembered every store on that street, even after all these years.
Oliver, always the voice of reason, said, "Okay, come on. Drive off to this almost real-life Santa's village, take a quick look, and then come back to Boston in time for Christmas Eve dinner."
She cocked her head.
"And by the looks of that town," Oliver went on, "you'll be dressed up as one of Santa's elves and handing out candy canes."
Laughing, she stepped off the sidewalk toward her car. "You know, I think you underestimate how good I would be as one of Santa's helpers." She tossed her hair back as she unlocked the door on her bright green Mazda.
"I don't think I am."
He pushed his hands into the pockets of his wool coat.
"Now get on the road. Have fun. Enjoy— what's the name of the town again?"
Still holding on to the door with one foot inside her car, she lifted her chin. "Evergreen." She pulled away from the curb, waving to Oliver. He looked as excited for her as she felt, and now the idea of going back to Evergreen had her stomach full of butterflies. Or maybe they were more like swirling snow angels. Evergreen, here I come.
Book 3, Christmas in Evergreen, Tidings of Joy, written by Nancy Naigle and narrated by Kathleen McKierney.
Chapter 1. Way up north, nestled in the heart of Vermont, there's a little town called Evergreen. Some say it's so far north that on a clear day, you might be able to catch a glimpse of Santa's workshop in the North Pole. Evergreen beckons tourists from all over. Many come just to see its famous magical snow globe that sits in a place of honor in the Kringle kitchen, owned by Joe and Carol Shaw. People come from far and wide to give that snow globe a good shake and make their wish, then drop a letter to Santa in the big red mailbox in the middle of town square. If they're lucky, they might even catch a glimpse of the old red truck decorated with garland and bows, delivering Christmas trees to the locals. A winter wonderland of sorts. Most any winter day, you'll find Evergreenians skating on the pond as the Evergreen Express, appropriately numbered 1225, brings new visitors from the city to town for a proper dose of holiday cheer. Only 5 passenger cars long, the train rides sold out well in advance, and although most of the people boarding the Evergreen Express in New York City this morning were visitors, eager to see if all the hype about the small town was for real, Ben Baxter was just trying to get back home. The bright red Evergreen Express stood out against the other trains in the station. Ben grasped the shiny brass rail and climbed aboard. As he walked down the aisle to choose a seat, he noticed a pretty blonde in a burgundy sweater taking pictures of the inside of the train so enthusiastically he could almost hear "Deck the Halls" playing inside her head. Thoroughly enjoying herself, she leaned back to get a better angle of one of the wreaths. She clicked off another picture with her smartphone, probably posting it to social media right now. Tap, 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 tap. She looked pleased with herself, and her smile pleased him. Fresh garland draped the interior of the train from end to end above the windows, leaving the scent of fresh pine hanging in the air. Twinkling white lights reflected in the red and gold Christmas ornaments. Festive. Beautiful. Every detail had been addressed, right down to a cheery red velvet bow at the end of each aisle of seats in the historic train. The Evergreen Express could probably even tempt Scrooge out of a bad day. The train, over 100 years old, had been restored to its original glory about 15 years ago. Ben could still remember the weekly news reports about the project. The tongue-and-groove 2-inch wooden plank flooring had been refinished by hand, one board at a time. It had been a painstaking process, but even today, the pine that lined the walls gleamed as if it were brand new. The original bench seats, positioned face-to-face from the days when the train had traveled in both directions on the same track, had been reinstalled, but thankfully, they'd chosen to update them to add a little cushion for the guests. For a split second, Ben considered sitting across from the perky blonde, but instead, he turned and took a seat a couple of rows forward, facing the direction the train would be running. Ben glanced across the station at the other trains, lined up waiting for passengers. He wondered why someone hadn't taken the initiative to attempt some type of nod to the holiday on any of the other trains. Not a wreath or a bow to be found. They seemed quite bah humbug, sitting there, void of colorful decorations. He considered himself lucky to be aboard the 12:25 to Evergreen this morning. He slid a hardcover novel from his briefcase, put on his glasses, and settled in to pass the time on the nearly 6-hour ride.
"All aboard for Evergreen, Vermont!" the announcement boomed with authority across the platform. And with that, the train whistle blew, and the train lurched and pulled away from Penn Station, right on time, headed for the snowy hills of Vermont. Through the city and suburbs, there wasn't much to see, but the closer they got to Vermont, the prettier it became. Ben lowered his book for a moment, letting his imagination wander while enjoying the view. The clickety-clack of the wheels on the tracks changed pitch as they entered the tunnel. In the darkness, the festive lights seemed even more magical. On the other side, tall pine trees, laden with snow, seemed to curtsy along both sides of the tracks, a welcome sign of what was ahead. High above the valley, the train chugged over the bridge that crossed the river. Against the icy backdrop, puffs of smoke guaranteed the folks tucked away inside the homes dotting the hillside were warm and safe. Black cows dotted the bright white fields as the snow continued to fall. Imagining how hard it must have been for the pioneers working their family farms in this valley during the harsh winters, he was thankful for the modern amenities of today. Then again, maybe he was more suited to that time. He still couldn't believe how he'd blown that job interview today. Sure, they'd been impressed by his portfolio of work, but they were right. None of his bylines were current. He'd have to prove he still had those journalistic chops if he was going to work in that field again. He wrestled with the idea of resuming his career at the paper. He'd loved that job, but he loved helping Nan at the library, too. And the kids were great. Helping them bond with books, find power in story. It was so satisfying. Maybe the universe was trying to tell him something. A photo click from a phone, followed by another and another, came from behind him. He was so tempted to turn around to see her again. Self-conscious, he smoothed the back of his hair. He heard a moan, followed by a grumbling from behind him. "Really? Low battery already?" The age of technology, he thought with a laugh. He didn't even have to turn around to see who the complainer was. It was a wonder her phone had lasted even this long. She'd been taking pictures the whole ride. He'd never personally understood why people were so obsessed with taking pictures from their phones. While concentrating on that tiny screen to capture the moment, they missed it real-time and life-sized altogether. Sometimes it was better to just open your eyes and be present. Those memories were the ones that'd last. A moment later, the woman walked down the aisle with her phone charger in hand.
Just as he was about to let her know there wasn't a charging station, the train jostled, throwing her off balance, right into him. Ben dropped his book and reached out to break her fall. "Oh, wow." She juggled a magazine, her phone, and that phone charger, practically plugging it right into his nose.
"Are you okay?"
He steadied her by the elbow. Taking off his horn-rimmed glasses, he set down his book and smiled. She waggled the phone charger in the air. "I'm so sorry. I was just, looking for a plug." The train pitched again.
"Sit,"
Ben said, motioning to the seat across the aisle from him.
"Good luck with that. This train's been running since way before anyone needed to plug anything in."
"Oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense." She studied her surroundings. "This is authentic? It's incredible. Look at all the decorations. It's the Polar Express combined with the Hogwarts Express and ended up the
Evergreen Express. We do a pretty good job of spreading Christmas cheer."
We? Excitement danced in her eyes. "Are you from Evergreen?" Ben couldn't hide his pride.
"Born and raised."
"Wow, I've been reading a lot about it. It's been getting a lot of press." She whipped out her copy of Vermont Traveler magazine, opening it to a dog-eared page, which she began quoting from. "With a world-renowned Christmas Eve festival, Evergreen, Vermont remains a must-see destination for anyone seeking the magic of the Christmas season."
"All true."
His playful side glance, he offered no apology. Those things were what he loved about his hometown.
People have a hard time believing it because, at first glance, the articles make us all seem like we're wandering around under the spell of some kind of peppermint gas leak, and we've lost our Christmas-addled minds.
"Like this?" Katie held up the magazine article. "You have 5 Christmas tree farms. Not tree lots, but farms?"
"The town is in a pine forest,"
he explained.
"They grow almost as fast as we sell 'em."
"A local coffee shop called the Kringle Kitchen?"
"Yes, but it's not named after Santa Claus."
"Or is it?" She narrowed her eyes.
"No, really. It was originally a bakery that made Kringle—"
She raised her hand to stop him mid-sentence. Her voice went up an octave as she went on. "That also has a snow globe said to grant Christmas wishes." She rested the magazine in her lap, then shifted her gaze toward him, eyes narrowed with a crooked smile. Even he was amused.
"Okay, yes, but the snow globe draws a lot of tourism, and it—"
He paused, unable to hold back a laugh.
"I get how it sounds, but that snow globe also sort of works?"
She rolled her eyes. "It grants your wishes?"
"I mean, kind of. Not mine specifically, but people I know. Yeah."
She didn't look the least bit convinced, but she didn't seem offended either, and the bottom line was no matter how cynical she seemed at the moment, she was headed for Evergreen. In a few hours, she'd see and experience it all firsthand. She pressed her lips together, and he could tell before she even opened her mouth that she was getting ready to come out with a zinger.
Here it comes.
And she didn't let him down. Sitting straighter in her seat, she cocked her head and grinned. "So, does the town just magically disappear after Christmas, only to reappear at the first snowfall?"
"Like Brigadoon?"
Did she really think the musical reference joke would be lost on him? She responded with a resounding, "Yes."
"No, they're the next town over."
He remained deadpan, enjoying the challenging banter.
"We're rivals because we do fewer musical numbers than they do, but our football team is much better."
"Good to know." She pushed her hair back over her shoulder.
Not only pretty, but smart.
He was glad to have landed the joke. Not everyone got his sense of humor.
"I'm Ben. Baxter."
He extended his hand across the aisle. "Katie Connell." She shook his hand. "Nice to meet you."
"You too."
He could feel his cheeks reddening, But he couldn't help it. Her playfulness was fresh, enjoyable.
So, what brings you to Evergreen?
Some time off. I had a busy year. I published a novel a few years ago, and since then, I've been working on some freelance assignments. And I've been doing a lot of reading. When I heard about your town, I thought I should come check it out.
She's a writer, too. They might actually have something in common. Or she could be one of those journalists looking to make fun of Evergreen. It happened all the time. Curious which camp she fell into, he leaned back in his seat. So, are you also going to be writing about this place?
No. I plan on experiencing Evergreen, she answered almost too fast. At some point, I have to start working on my second novel, and I think it might be good for me to take a break, clear my head, change of scenery. As the train rounded the next corner, he pointed out the window.
You're in luck, because scenery is something we do have.
A flicker of excitement played on her lips as she twisted in her seat to get a better view. She lifted her phone, momentarily forgetting she was nearly out of battery. Oh, wow, she gasped, taking in the view of the evergreens against the mountainsides, glistening snow.
We're almost there.
Watching her take it all in was like seeing it again for the first time himself. I can't wait. Katie hugged her things to her chest. It's gorgeous. The Evergreen Express slowed, its whistle blowing as they inched along to a stop at the train station in Evergreen, Vermont. The depot was small, but with 2 chimneys puffing white smoke, even with the rooftop covered in snow, it seemed cozy and inviting. Decorated with the same garland and wreaths as the inside of the train, it appeared as if Santa's elves had been hard at work here, too. The train conductor announced, "Last stop, Evergreen, Vermont." Ben let Katie leave ahead of him. She rolled her bright blue suitcase to the door, and the porter carried it down the stairs. "Thank you." She grabbed one of the brass rails to steady herself down the steps, extending the handle on her bag. Stepping out of the way, she seemed a little lost as she merged into the throng of locals bundled in their winter coats, hats, and scarves, anxiously searching for familiar faces. Ben exited right behind her with his briefcase, glad to see her slow down and turn back with a smile. "Wow, would you look at this?" She lifted her hands out as if she might catch the tiny snowflakes floating to the ground around them. He couldn't help but enjoy her excitement.
Can I offer you a ride to town?
"Oh, thanks, but everything I've read mentions it's a beautiful walk."
It is a nice walk.
Surprisingly, he was disappointed she refused. He thought their interaction had been fun, even borderline flirty.
Wishful thinking.
Shaking it off, he pointed behind him.
So the center of town is pretty much that way, and that's where all the action takes place.
All right.
Okay. See ya.
He turned to go to his car, feeling the teensiest bit of rejection. "I guess, He turned just in time to see her do a playful jazz hands as she said, "Merry Christmas!"
We hope you have enjoyed listening to these Hallmark audiobook samples. To view the entire Hallmark Publishing collection, please visit dreamscapepublishing.com.